So I'm going to be tying up my favorite fly, the surf candy. I'm going to be using mustad tarpon hooks. I'm going to be using a size 2 for this fly. This is the 1.0 pack, but I don't have the packs for the size 2 anymore. I lost it somewhere. So I start by always crushing my barbs. If you need a barb to keep your fish on the line, maybe you should reconsider your fishing skills there. So I start by crushing the barb, and I'm going to secure the hook in the vise so that it runs pretty much parallel with the ground. For me, that's important here. All right, tighten the vise up a little bit. Here we go. I'm going to be using a green thread for this fly. You can use many different types of threads, monofilament even, to keep the head clear. But for this one, I want a green head on these. I'm going to do a pink back, green belly, and green lateral line, and a white belly. And I also have some other little details that I like to put in. So I start by getting my tying thread on the hook, snipping off the extra, and winding it back down, building up a little bit of a head here. And then I keep my thread a little ways back from the eye of the hook. And the first thing I do is I start from the middle out. I'm using synthetic tying fibers. I already have some cut from previous flies, and it really helps that you can keep your extra materials in a little notepad. You just lift up a leaflet of paper and slip it in there, so that way it's easy and quick to grab while you're tying up multiple flies. It's always a good idea to keep these a little bit sparse, because a little bit goes a long way. I like to tilt my flies so I can see over the top, and I know that things are coming out a little more symmetrical. I twist my bobbin here with a counterclock twist, and that helps the thread to jump backwards on the material, which will help it to stay holding onto the top of the hook. I give a couple loose wraps and then pull everything tight to lock it in place. Make sure it looks symmetrical. Really lock it in. Snip off the extra, back in the notepad, and then wrap down the body and back up towards the top, securing those ends down, creating a nice little ramp there. Now I also like, and then I come back a little bit, I like to add in a tiny couple strands of this green crystal flash here. I grab 2, fold it over, which then becomes 4 if you're good at math. These can be tricky to fold. There we go. All right. Midway point, snip it. Make sure the ends are kind of even. It's not that big of a deal. You can always even them up later. And again, I like to hold the material a little bit towards me on this side of the hook, because when I start to wrap, my materials want to kind of twist around the top. And I just hold it there. I'm on top, nice and even. Really helps to, just give it a couple checks, make sure you're even, so you can, symmetry is nice. It's not necessary though. And then back down, and you see that head is really starting to take its shape. Got that nice ramp to it. Because we use a lot of thread on the surf candies to build up those heads. Now I got my pink synthetic fiber, and that's going to be the top, which is our back here. And then I place that on there. I go to about where the vise arm starts. And again, give that a little tilt. Twist counterclockwise to help that thread jump backwards. And some light wraps, and then lock it in place, even it out a little bit. Try to get that clean. Snip off the extra. And then something I like to do also to help this pink pop a little bit is I'm going to also use some pink crystal flash here to run down the top of the back. And again, just 2 pieces. A little bit goes a long way with the crystal flash. It really stands out. So I'll cut 2 of these guys. And again, I'll give it a fold. Just like that. Place it on the back. Counterclockwise twist. A couple loose wraps. Once the material is secured in place, again, snip off the extra. And just to make sure it's really running down the back evenly, I'll really hold those in place so they don't twist. Nothing worse than tying up a fly and it looks perfect, and then you look at the other side and they're like nothing alike. All right, so that's like the top part of the fly. Now I'm going to switch down onto our bottom. So I'll flip the hook over, and for that I'll be using a white synthetic fiber here. It's actually like kind of clear, but it looks like it's white. I snipped off a couple extras just to even it up. Take a quick approximation on my length there. We'll go something like that. Try to split that hook a little bit with the material, but it's not super important right now. And the belly fibers can be a little tricky because that hook point is kind of in my finger a little bit, which can be annoying. All right, and the belly materials are secure and even. And now snip off the extra. I try to stay a little bit more towards the head here on the belly when I start the material, so that way the bottom part of the head ramp is a little more built up, because we only have 1 layer on the bottom of the hook for the belly, whereas the top layer kind of, it's got the green and the pink on there, so it builds up a little better. And come back down. Just getting all these loose ends tied in here. Sometimes you got to build the head up just a little bit more for the thread to really grab them. All right, and then I come back just to about like the middle of where my head is, and I add in a cool little detail that most people don't. I take 6 strands of red crystal flash, and I'm going to use about 1/4 of an inch or 1/8 of an inch of these 6 strands on the bottom of this fly to make a little kind of gill plate action here. Now these are very tricky, but once you get the material locked in evenly, it really looks good on the bottom of the fish. Snip those off. Use my notepad from Trout Unlimited here. All right. Because they're staying even. Try to even those out a little bit more. There we go. See, gives it a nice little red gill plate there. All right, flip this fly back over. Now I'm going to tie on a lateral line for this. I just have, it's similar to a Flashabou material, but this is actually just material that I found somewhere that I liked. I cut into strips, and I use it to give it that nice kind of shiny lateral line that you'll see on sand eels and Atlantic silver sides, and I line it up with the hook eye and the shank of the hook, and I go straight back, which also runs parallel with that green lateral line. And these materials like to really reflect and bring out the color of what's behind them. So it is nice. You can switch up your color patterns: green back, pink middle, white belly. There's a million different combinations that you can use. Flip the hook over, line it up right, give it a little pinch here, and start to tie that in. Sometimes I don't go like super tight on the flash material here because I like the way it looks on the head when it runs down. All right, and that's all we got for the tying part. Grab a whip finish, do a 5-turn whip finish. Then I use a razor blade to cut the thread at the end. Now I'm going to come in with a thin, hard version of Solo Res UV Cure resin. And one thing I like to do here now is for this part, I'm going to bring this up so that way when I put my hook back in the vise, everything will be parallel, in line with the main shaft of the vise. So place the hook back in there, because for this UV resin part, when I spin, I kind of want it to be like nice and even there. Now to hold these strands back, something that I've started using, which is super helpful, is just a little piece of a straw, and I slit it down the middle so that way I can slip it around the hook, and it helps to hold all the materials for me. It's like it's a helping hand. It's like a second hand. And then I'll come through with the thin version of the UV Cure resin. This will just help to kind of hold the fibers in place while I work on the fly. This isn't really super important for the actual building up of the head. All right, that's that, and my bottle of thick resin fell down. All right, got it. So now onto that, I will take the thick version, and then I am going to be putting on red eyes on this guy, red stick-on eyes. All right. This fly is probably my most successful late fall fly, but it works great for multiple species. Hickory shad, love them. Striped bass, love them, especially when they're on the sand eels and Atlantic silver sides. They really go nuts for these things. So start by getting some reds here. I try not to touch the UV resin the best that I can, because this stuff can be a little nasty, but I keep a paper towel on the desk here. You can get allergic to this stuff. Then I just use a bodkin to kind of even these up. And again, I'm using the hook shaft as my measuring for up and down. Try to keep it even on that hook shaft. Give it a couple spins. Eyes look really good and symmetrical. Solidify them in place right here. It's pretty much all it needs for the light. Then I come back in with the thick, and I'm going to build the head up. I'm going to try not to build it up too much, but you can adjust the amount that it sinks by adding lead wire to the shank of the hook, or having a little bit more of a built-up head. I'm getting down to the end of my bottle. There we go. There it is. Just fill in some of these low spots around the eye, around that little gill plate. And you can use bodkin, but to smooth out this UV resin. But I also use the tip of the bottle because sometimes you just need to use a little dab in place. Letting that, working it back a little bit. I work it almost to where the hook starts to appear from the materials. I just use the tip of the bottle to kind of smooth this out because it's thick formulas. Really nice to work with. And I try to keep it spinning because if you let it just sit one way for too long, you'll see like all the UV starts to kind of fall down with gravity. But sometimes that can be useful for you, really help you to saturate the fibers. Just try to even this out around the eye here. Pull some of this forward. Get the ends of those threads where my whip finish was. There's a lot of surface tension with the thick resin, so it does kind of pull itself like towards the middle, and of course with gravity. All right, see, this is why I like to use the bottle, because I can see I need like a tiny drip more right here at the eye. And that was perfect. Try to get those bubbles out. That's looking good, looking like everything's covered now. As I spin it, I'm looking for that symmetry. Spinning it also will help smooth out the material, making it even. That looks good right there. Hit it before it gets worse. All right, just keep it spinning so that way it stays even while it hardens. It hardens pretty quick, but there's a lot of resin on here, so I have to kind of keep this UV flashlight, or as some people call it, a torch. Maybe they just say that to make it sound tough. I don't know. But yeah, this one came out really good. Nice symmetry. I have one long strand of fiber here. This is where I go through and just try to tidy up any of the other materials. Sometimes I cut the material short of the lateral line. Sometimes I leave it long of the lateral line. But there it is. Pink back, green midsection, white belly, surf candy. Easily my favorite fly for saltwater.